Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another social emotional workshop. And we are with Henry Ford Health today, and they are going to be talking about opioids. Lisa, we're so glad to have you back. Welcome. And I am going to share my screen and we can get started.
And we're going to skip slide 4.
Yeah, I already have it marked out. Okay.
Okay, so hi everyone. I'm a social worker at Henry Ford Maple Grove Center. We are located in West Bloomfield, Michigan. We are the inpatient and outpatient substance abuse treatment facility for Henry Ford. And I'm here today to talk to you about the opioid epidemic. So just as a reminder, some of you have been in our programs before, but addiction is a disease. It's not a choice. It's not a character weakness or a character flaw. This is something that all of us are at risk of. It's chronic, meaning once you have it, you always have it. It's progressive, meaning it gets worse over time. It's familial, meaning it runs in families very commonly, and unfortunately, it is fatal. So what happens when people are addicted is inherited or acquired abnormalities in brain chemistry create an altered response to alcohol and other drugs, which in turn causes a wide array of problems. And there are certain symptoms, signs and symptoms. There's 11 different criteria for substance use disorder or addiction. And the main ones are a loss of control, continued use despite adverse consequences, compulsive thinking, and denial. So today we're going to talk about opioids. We know them as pain pills. So you've heard of these, I'm sure, many of them: Percocet, Percodan, morphine, Darvocet, Dilaudid, methadone, OxyContin, oxycodone, hydrocodone, Vicodin, Loratab, codeine, fentanyl, heroin, and more. There's many, many different types of opioids. So how do they work? These drugs bind to the opioid receptors on the cells of the brain and throughout a person's body. And when the drugs attach to the receptors, they dull a person's pain. And that's the good news, because that's why they can help us so much when we're recovering from injuries or surgery and a doctor prescribes these medications for pain. So that's the good news. The bad news is that these drugs also impact the brain's reward system or pleasure system, which means some people can feel very euphoric or high. Now, not everybody. I will say that both of my daughters had their wisdom teeth out. One of them got excessively irritable and crabby. The other one, it did not change her behavior at all, but it did impact the pain. Okay, but there are some people who love the feeling. Okay, they just love the feeling and they want to feel that again and again and again. So how would you know if somebody is using opioids? There's a lot of signs and symptoms, but the main ones are contracted pupils. So in other words, the pupils are pinpoint. No response to light. They have needle marks, not just on their arms where you would think, but really any part of their body. They sleep at unusual times. So you could be having a conversation with somebody, and in the middle of your conversation, they just fall asleep, they nod out. Sweating is common, vomiting, coughing, sniffling, twitching, loss of appetite. So any of these symptoms could indicate opioid use. So how does an opioid addiction begin? Well, some people are prescribed medication by a doctor for a legitimate medical or dental problem, and they take it as directed. Okay, but those people could become physically dependent on the drug. They're not addicted, but they're physically dependent, and this could happen to any of us. Now, some people are prescribed overprescribed medication by a medical professional. So that means they're given too much medication for too long of a period of time. And again, they could become physically dependent on the drug, but not addicted. But that's how addiction starts for many people. So for many people, they go doctor and hospital pharmacy shopping. And now there's a system in place called MAPS. It stands for Michigan Automated Prescription Service. I know some of you are not from Michigan, but it might also be in other states, where doctors and pharmacies are required to look a person up to make sure they're not going to CVS on Monday and Rite Aid on Tuesday, and Dr. A on one day and Dr. B on another day. So they're able to, if they're able to determine that a patient is doing that, they have the authority to refuse to fill the prescription. So then what happens is people progress from use of gateway drugs. Those are the drugs that people typically begin with, like alcohol and marijuana. And after some time, that's not strong enough for many people, so they look for other options. So they turn to prescription pain pills, which you can buy off the street, very expensively, by the way. It could be up to $80 a pill, purchased over the internet. So believe it or not, you can have these drugs delivered to your front door, stolen from family and friends. And it's common, you know, grandparents, parents might line up their medications on the kitchen table for the week, and the child or the grandchild comes over, and if they are desperate enough, they will steal from their own parents and grandparents. But that's easy access. And open houses, when people sell their house, that people come in from the public, they say, I need to use the bathroom. They clean out the medicine cabinet. And when the homeowner comes home at the end of the day, they don't know who's been in their house, but all their meds are gone. So that is easy access for an addict. So if you know of anybody who's going to be selling their house and hosting an open house, tell them to clean out their cabinet before they leave. So what happens over time as the addiction continues developing, because it is a progressive disease, their tolerance increases, meaning they need more and more of the drug to achieve the same effect. And over time, a person continues to use just to feel normal, not even to get high, but just to avoid the very uncomfortable withdrawal symptoms. And the withdrawal symptoms from opioids are horrific. It's like the worst flu you've ever had and then some. So what happens over time is sometimes you don't have access anymore. The pills become inaccessible or too expensive. So people who find them to be too expensive then may turn to a life of crime. They may steal for money to purchase drugs, or they might consider a cheaper, more accessible alternative like heroin. So heroin can be injected through the veins, snorted through the nose, or smoked. So I'm pretty sure that everybody here knows that the reason we have such a deadly opioid epidemic is because of fentanyl or carfentanil. These are drugs that are way stronger than morphine. And what is happening is drug sellers are lacing these drugs with the synthetic opioids, which are very, very cheap. So in other words, they're expanding their supply by loading up their supply with synthetic opioids that cost them next to nothing. So it does two things. One, it gets them more money because their supply is bigger, but also these drugs can get people excessively high if they don't die. And an addict likes the feeling. So he or she is likely to go back to the same person who's selling it for more if they like the feeling. But the problem is that not everybody survives. These drugs are deadly. They're the cause of many overdoses and many deaths, and it's very, very frightening. So what kind of help is available for someone who has an opioid addiction and wants to stop using? Well, treatment is available. Some people have health insurance, and their health insurance will likely pay for at least a part of their treatment. But if someone does not have health insurance, or they're on Medicaid, or they're indigent, every county has a pool of money available to help people to get treatment. So the treatment agencies may not all be the same. So for example, where I work, we do not accept Medicaid, but there are many treatment agencies that do accept Medicaid. And then there's support groups. There's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and many others that are free and available in most communities, which can also help people to address an addiction. So when we talk about treatment, what we're talking about is inpatient detoxification and stabilization. So people who have the very, very uncomfortable withdrawal symptoms, including shakes, nausea, nervousness, sweating, and many, many more, physical pain, it's really hard to kick it on their own. Now, if they were to try to detox themselves at home, they would not die. Some drugs you will die, but not with opioids. But it's so much easier to go into a medical facility where there's medical care and what we call comfort medications. Okay, so if they have diarrhea or they have a headache or they have anxiety, it can be treated. But as you know, treatment of detox and stabilization for opioids is really only 5 days, and that's not enough. So it's followed by continuous programs. There's inpatient and outpatient programs, attendance at 12-step meetings, and we're very happy to have access to what we call medication-assisted treatment. These are medications that help people stay in recovery. So you might have heard of methadone, which is offered at a methadone clinic. We don't offer that where I work, but we do offer buprenorphine, which is known as Subutex or Suboxone. And what these medications do, and they're legal, by the way, if prescribed by a doctor, they activate the opioid receptors just enough for the opioid addicted person to function, but not feel the withdrawal or cravings. Okay, so it's enough to function, not enough to get high, but it helps them to not feel those symptoms that are going to cause relapse. And what happens with these medications is people are on them, allowing their brain to heal while they are getting counseling, support groups, and other help so that eventually they can get off medication-assisted treatment and continue in recovery with the skills that they've learned. And then there's another type of drug called naltrexone. That's an oral medication, but there's another one called Vivitrol, which is the same thing in an injectable form. So that's an injection people take every 28 days. So someone who doesn't want to take a medication every day just needs to make an appointment at a doctor's office for Vivitrol every 28 days. And both of these block receptors and prevent the opioid from having its usual effects. So again, keeps people in recovery, allows them to go to work, go to school, take care of their kids, do whatever they need to do. Now, depending on where a person lives, in the Tri-County area of Metro Detroit, there are plenty of providers, but in the more rural areas, the underserved areas, they are now allowing physicians' assistants and nurse practitioners to prescribe and dispense this medication because there aren't enough resources throughout the state. So I'm wondering if anybody has ever heard of Narcan. So Narcan is what first responders carry with them so that when they get a call about somebody who overdoses, they have the ability to save lives by giving an injection. But people like us can also carry Narcan with us, and I do. I have it in my purse at all times that I got for free. And the Narcan, if I were to run into somebody who has fallen out from an opioid overdose, I could use a nasal spray to hopefully save their life. So what it does, it actually stops an overdose. It takes away their high, and it blocks the opioid from impacting their opioid receptors. So it used to cost quite a bit of money for families, and it used to be by prescription only, but just recently they have made it over the counter where any family member can get it. I got it for free because I got trained through a drug prevention coalition, and any of you can do that as well. When I got the medication, when I got trained, I did not want to take the medication. I wanted to save it for somebody who could use it more than me, because thankfully I don't have anyone in my family who is addicted to opioids. But I was asked, do you go to the gas station? Do you go to a restaurant? Do you go to a library? And of course I do. And therefore they said, you could be saving a life anywhere you go, because anybody could have a problem anywhere. Now, the good news about Narcan is if I come upon someone and I don't know if they've overdosed on opioids, all I know is they're passed out. If I use this medication on them, it will not hurt them. But if they have fallen out because of an opioid overdose, I could save their life. So as you see there, this is an explanation of how the nasal spray is given. And it takes just a couple of seconds to have an impact. So what about our community? How is our community responding? Well, many health systems are now instituting safe prescribing practices, meaning they are educating doctors and nurses and nurse practitioners about how to prescribe this medication safely. It used to be they'd give you 90 days worth of supply, and then you'd call because your prescription's about to end, and they'd give you more over the phone, or they'd call it into your pharmacy. And now they're not allowed to do that anymore. They're much stricter. There are signs in emergency departments of hospitals letting people know that we are no longer just blatantly openly prescribing these medications, that there are a checks and balances system, because what would happen is people who were addicted would come into the emergency department under the guise of having back pain or stomach pain, and they need these drugs, and now they're not so easy to get. And we talked about the Michigan Automated Prescription Service, and very important to consider alternative pain medication management techniques, different types of biofeedback and guided imagery and psychotherapy and aromatherapy. And there's a whole bunch of different pain management techniques where a person might not even need opioids. So that includes exercise, yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, Reiki, which is energy work, acupuncture, guided imagery, chiropractic treatment, hypnosis, biofeedback, aromatherapy, relaxation therapy, herbal remedies, massage, music therapy, mindfulness, supplements and vitamins, anti-inflammatory diet, psychotherapy, and many more. You're going to be hearing about this a lot more. The real concern is, why should a person be on an opioid medication when something else could work well? So how is our community responding? Most communities now have what they call drug take-back days, where on certain days that are publicized well ahead of time, the police departments and the sheriff's departments will take back drugs, no questions asked. Now, I can say that our local police department, the West Bloomfield Police Department, will take back drugs every day of the week, every week of the year. But some communities have a special push for people to clean out their medicine cabinets, get rid of medication that maybe someone used before they died and the family never got rid of it, or maybe it's expired. But what happens when you turn it in is it doesn't get into the wrong hands by our children and on the streets. So West Bloomfield calls their program Operation Medicine Cabinet, that runs every single day. And then there's doTERRA bags. These are bags that pharmacies give out that you can put your pills in, and in an environmentally safe way, it destroys them. So then you just throw it out in the garbage. It's no longer usable by people who are addicted, and it's not hurting our environment. So there's chemicals in it that if you put your pills in the bag and you add water and you seal it, it'll take care of that for you. Hope Not Handcuffs is a program that many police agencies and the state police are involved in, where any person can go to a police station and say, I'm an addict, I need and I want help. They will not be arrested, even if they have drugs on them, and they will call for help. They will help them to get into a bed for detox as soon as possible. And the Angels, the Michigan State Police Angels, are volunteers who will meet someone at a police department, help them fill out the paperwork, and help them to stay comfortable while they're waiting for a bed to be available, and then transport them to that treatment agency so that they can get treatment. Drug courts are really effective. They have very, very strict rules that somebody has to follow, but their success rate is huge. So what it does is it prevents people from continuously relapsing and getting involved in the criminal justice system. They get regular drug testing. They have to meet with a judge every single week. They have to attend meetings and prove it. They have to do all the things that are good components of a recovery program. And then if they succeed, they graduate from drug court and they hopefully live a very happy, healthy life. Community coalitions like the one in Oakland County is how I got trained on Narcan, but they have all sorts of different programs. And there are, I know in Oakland County, there are 22 coalitions. They're also well represented in Macomb and Wayne counties. And Families Against Narcotics is an organization, an advocacy organization of families, people who are addicted, and community members who do all sorts of programming in the community and support all of the above that we just talked about. They also run support groups. They have a family coach who will work with a family of someone who's addicted, and they also do all sorts of programming in the community to educate people. So that's how our community is responding. And they also run, unfortunately, a grief support group for people who have lost a loved one due to addiction. And these are the local chapters, or not local, I guess statewide. If you're interested in learning more, if you go on YouTube and type in Chasing the Dragon, it's about 50 minutes, and it will really educate you on what it's like to have an opioid addiction. The other thing you can do is Narcotics Anonymous is a 12-step program, and frequently they have an open talk. So that's a speaker who gets up in front of the group, and it's open to the public, and tells their story. So if you want to learn more about people who have narcotics issues, you can absolutely attend an open talk and learn about someone's story. And it's always an inspirational, uplifting, successful story of someone who's made it through. And the most important thing to remember is that there is hope. There are millions of people in long-term recovery who are leading happy, productive, healthy lives. If you think you don't know anybody, you are wrong. We all know people who are in long-term recovery doing well. There are doctors, our nurses, our teachers, our next door neighbors, our friends' parents. They are everywhere. There's something like 23 million Americans in recovery. And the only reason we don't know they're in recovery is because they haven't told us. They're doing well in life and they blend into the rest of us. So what I want to leave you with is an opioid addiction is a really tough thing to kick, but it can be done and there is hope.
If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to unmute and ask your questions or make your comment. Or if you prefer, you can type it in the chat and I'll be more than happy to read it.
I have a question. Someone who is prescribed Suboxone, if I said that correctly, why would they not take it? Is it,
I think you mean Suboxone.
yeah.
So why would they not take it?
If
Oh,
they were
wow.
prescribed it, yeah.
Lots of reasons. Some people don't want to take it. They want to sell it on the streets, make some money. Some people maybe don't like how it makes them feel, don't like the side effects, and haven't had a conversation with a doctor about what to do about that. There are people who don't want to take it because they want to get high. So if it's in their system, it's going to stop that feeling of euphoria.
Any other questions, you guys? All right, then we will then bring this session to a close. Thank you so much, Lisa. Excellent presentation as always. And thank you guys for joining, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.